you know what Paul is really talking about.
Once again, it is time. Hello everyone, and welcome back to 4+, your favorite madhouse with your favorite host, Mr. Minus. Today's video is a bit different than usual. Don't worry, it's still full of frights. Some of you may or may not remember that earlier this year, we suffered a tragedy with the loss of director David Lynch. He died on January 15th, 2025 at the age of 78. But in those near 8 decades of life, David Lynch left behind plenty of work that horrifies many. Despite a lackluster depiction of Dune, he's responsible for many well-known films such as Twin Peaks, Elephant Man, and my personal favorite of his work, Eraserhead. His work was very unorthodox, which added to the atmosphere of his work. It was very dreamlike with surreal visuals across the board. His work isn't exactly beginner-friendly if you watch movies to see how many jokes The Rock says while flexing.
Better hide your baby, or
you better hide that big-ass forehead.
Since it's been nearly a year since the loss of this visionary, we decided to take a look at the short films of David Lynch, but I'm gonna need some help on this adventure. Despite what they say, I'm just one man. So I've decided to recruit fellow film enthusiast, Mr. Dr. Professor Ratio, for this daring adventure.
Hi, how are you?
Yes, that's right. The dynamic duo are back at it again. Name a more iconic duo. I'll wait.
Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy, unite!
Well, fuck. You win. But enough gab. It's time to grab our Lynches and set up our Davids. This is the short films of David Lynch. But before we begin, please be sure to like and subscribe. Additionally, please be sure to check out the description for 4Player, our gaming channel. You'll also find our Instagram, Letterboxd, and community Discord, where we can see your suggestions and just have a good time. Alright, now we can go. 6 men getting sick 6 times. Our movie opens up with a bit of a story from David Lynch. He explained that it all started in Philadelphia, 1967.
Oh my god, so fucking funny!
He was attending the Pennsylvania Academy of the Fine Arts. He was partaking in an art contest, but earlier in that year, he painted a picture of a garden. It was a very dark painting in the literal sense, as he was using dark green against black where the flowers were coming from. As he did, a gust of wind came by, which gave him the idea of wanting to see a painting move. It sounds like this is the big moment, as he has discovered cinema. So David built a screen and projected a minute of animation, that being the 6 men getting sick 6 times. That indeed is a very literal title, as we do watch it 6 times, but more on that in a sec. The video opens with 5 faces appearing on screen as a 6th one is formed between the 2 on the right side. A siren is heard through the entirety of this as we see what appears to be organs forming underneath. The screen turns black as the men all cover their faces. We see everything go red for a second before everyone begins throwing up. The colors vary from black to white to even blue as the organs begin to fill in with red. The men cradle their organs before they're covered in a mix of colors, from yellow, white, purple, and even black. The last thing we see is the screen turning purple as all the men vomit on the screen, now looking decayed and weak. The video plays a total of 6 times, but not much more changes. It only gets slightly slower with the siren getting more long-winded, or so I think. I very well could be imagining things. It's a simple video, but still unsettling. The imagery of the men looks pretty surreal and the simulation of the vomit is liquidy, making it look more realistic in the depiction of them getting sick. At least to me, this made the sickness look a lot more malevolent, as this isn't just a simple cold. Your innards are literally dying. My only real issue is just that the video replayed itself without much change. I was expecting there to be some, but at the end of the day, this seemed like an experiment for Lynch. His idea of seeing a painting move had finally been realized, even if it was a bit simple and short. Overall, I'd say this is a great intro into his work. It's intriguing, but also unsettling due to the imagery and the atmosphere. The alphabet. After completing the film, David Lynch won first place. The issue was, however, the video was expensive, costing around $200, or rather nearly $2,000 in today's currency. David was upset with the price. However, in the audience, a man named Barton Wasserman took note of the film. He approached David and offered $1,000 to make something for him. That's just above $9,000 in 2025. David took the deal and decided it was time to get a camera. He had found one for $500, calculated to be $5,000 in our year. He asked the manager to hold on to the camera for him, but they refused. It was near closing time and they reopened at 8 a.m. David stayed up all night and arrived at the opening to get the camera. He even kept the receipt for his monumental occasion. He was quite happy with the product and started animating at work. He wanted to do a short film mixing live action and animation, but it didn't come out the way he hoped. The film was blurred from start to finish. It was hard to tell what was going on, which was a major issue, but David wasn't as upset as he should have been. He called Bart and explained the situation. Bart gave him the rest of the money and told him to do whatever he needed to. This was how he came up with the alphabet. Not literally. At the time, David was married to a woman named Peggy, not Carter, who was an art student. She was having a nightmare and was repeating the alphabet over and over again. David heard of this, which triggered him to make the alphabet. We open with a lady in bed as we hear a school of kids chanting the ABC. We get a close-up of a pale face as what sounds like wind can be heard. We're greeted with this image as a man begins singing opera, from what I can tell. The alphabet slowly begins forming on screen in many different forms. G in particular seems to be very excited to be here. It's a good thing he also correctly formatted LMNOP in one block. I'd have checked out if he didn't. The wind gets louder as the singing stops. The screen goes black and ew. I am flattered, but please stop licking your lips at me. We see a small game of Pong with lovely sounds before the ball reaches the top. We see a lone A flashing us, hot, as it seemingly gives birth to smaller A's. Fucking A, dude. We hear what sounds like baby cries as a small A begins transforming in front of us. There are small sounds of a lady talking to the baby as this forms on the A's head. Talk about a dickhead. It begins turning red and then black as the cries get louder. A face forms in the A with a haunting hum. We see a red box form with some kind of organ on top, and it begins shooting letters into the All Hope Is Gone mask. It gasps, so does the lady, and then begins crying blood. Relatable. We get a close-up of what I think is a strawberry. God, I could go for some right now. Before we see a close-up of another mouth. It reminds us that we are dealing with the human form. We get more strawberry porn as the ABC chants return. We're back with a lady in bed as black dots form on her and the bed. We then get a rendition of the ABCs. Observe.
A, B, C, D, E, F, G.
The lady goes back to bed and coughs up blood as the wind gets louder. I'm not gonna lie, I have never been more afraid of fucking letters since kindergarten when I first learned them. The video really is an amazing look at just how Lynch approaches horror and disturbing imagery. The fact this was inspired by a nightmare really is on display, as this is very dreamlike in its atmosphere. Barely any of it makes sense, as it seems to be unrestrained by the normal rules of physics. It's also not helped by the very dark lighting contrasting with the pale and almost ghost-like live-action parts with the lady in bed and the talking lips. It kept me in a lot of suspense. I was just waiting for something to jump out at me, but nothing did. The closest we got to that was that unsettling close-up of the lady. I'd say this is something that will stick with me for quite a while. The ABC song at the end was also very unnerving between the images and the almost too soothing voice of the lady, really making this a nightmare to watch. This was made nearly 50 years ago, and it somehow feels so timeless in how it can scare someone. God, the 70s were a strange time, man. The grandmother. David explains to us that after the alphabet, he started to get support. As a result, his next project was something he was very passionate about. He wrote the script, but it wasn't all that detailed. It was bare, being only 8 pages, with everything being simple sentences. During this time, his friend and his wife brought up the idea of Lynch submitting for a grant at the American Film Institute, or AFI for short. No, not the dudes who sang Miss Murder. All he needed to do was submit previous work and a script. So David said, why the hell not? Eventually, they announced a previous group's winners, which discouraged him. He thought with their talent, there was no chance they were going to accept him. On a rainy day, David told his wife to call him if something exciting happened while he worked. His wife merely repeated the same thing back to him. While at work, the phone rang like any other time. It was his wife, but she wanted to speak to his colleague. He told him the phone would ring again for him soon. Sure enough, it did, and what do you know, David got his grant. Now we transition to the grandmother. We open to a pipe filling a hole with a white substance before we see some kind of person sprout from it. We then cut to a man growing from the ground. Is this a mole man or an Underminer origin story? Another host comes out and we see now another person sprouts from the same substance. Their figures merge together and we get a better look at the couple. They play about as we see a seed leave and form its own puddle. The man seems concerned as we see a third person sprout from the puddle. This time it looks like a child. And sure enough, a child comes from the ground. The man and woman jump about as the man crawls over to the child. The woman looks like she's crying on the floor as we go back to the figures. We see the father figure yelling at the child before it yells back and flies off. The child is now in a dark bedroom. He looks around before taking a seat on the bed. He seems discontent as he picks up a flower. Meanwhile, the man and woman are crawling about outside before we see their figures detach and fly off. We see the woman fixing her hair while the father drinks. The dude kinda looks like Jack White from the White Stripes, not gonna lie. We then cut to an animation of a sunrise as the child sits in bed. He stands up and is that a pee stain? Anyways, the kid gets dressed and leaves as Jack White comes into the room. He looks and sees the pee stain, assumingly, and gets angry. He shouts "mutt" and drags the kid back to the bed. The kid cries, and we now cut to the mother sitting at a table. She gestures him over, calling him Mutt. Mutt comes over, and she tries to hug him. He seems uncomfortable, which sends the mom into a frenzy. She cries and shakes him around before she lays on the floor, and Mutt leaves. Mutt goes back to the bedroom, but hears a whistling. He goes to investigate and follows the whistling. Eventually, he finds a room with a bag that says seeds. The bag whistles at him as he reaches inside. He rifles through it before finding a rock. The rock whistles at him, and he places it on the bed. The next day, the boy comes in with a bucket of soil and pours it on the bed. He places the rock inside, covers it up, and then proceeds to water it. We cut to the next day and see something has sprouted from the soil. Adds flower power, kid. Mutt seems to be happy with the results and starts watering it again. The rock grows more as time goes on, and Mutt sleeps near the thing. The sun animation plays again, and the mother crawls about. Jack White seems even angrier and pushes his kid in the bed even more. He cries out again, and suddenly we cut to Mutt going up the stairs. An odd sound can be heard, and well... The rock plant thing is giving birth, cause why not, and so Mutt helps deliver it from evil. Once finished, we see the thing being born is an old woman, because why wouldn't it be? I'm not gonna lie, dude, this is getting a bit strange for me, and I am sick. I still haven't had any soup. So on that note, I'm gonna let my barnacle boy handle this one. So with that said, Mr. Dr. Professor Ratio, you handle this?
Now, Mr. Minus, we've seen stranger things. But after the old woman is born, she crawls out of her goo and looks around the room. The boy grabs his flower thing from his bedside table, adjusts his hair, and heads back upstairs into the room. He presents the older woman with the flower, and she stares at it, and then back at the boy. A thankful look on her face begins to emerge, and the two smile at each other, and the boy leans his head on the woman. Suddenly, they are interrupted by the cocoon thing making some weird noises and shrinking in size. Back downstairs, the dad and mom are at the dinner table. The mom forcefully grabs Mutt and makes him sit down. The two parents begin eating, and a wailing, moaning sound is heard, but the two seem to ignore it, as Mutt sits and stares at his plate. The parents begin screaming at Mutt, upset he's not eating his food, and as Mutt reaches for the plate, his dad screams at him and smacks him away. And his mom starts making this fucking seagull sound, and both of the parents continue to angrily scream and point at him. Mutt runs back upstairs to his sleeping grandmother and finds a bowl of food nearby, which he begins eating from. Fat ass. The following night, the grandmother sits in a rocking chair and whistles to Mutt to wake him from his sleep. After this little shit pissed again in bed, he gets up, slowly heads upstairs before Mutt, Mutt, Mutt. His parents are screaming at him again. Then, we are suddenly transported to Cartoon Land, where Mutt wears an executioner hood, and he kills both of his parents. His piss stain then grows on its own, and it fills this cavern thing that Mutt then drops into. We then get some weird inflation stuff, where his parents inflate and then crack like eggs, and then they just kind of float off. Got back to reality, and Mutt, in slow motion, runs crying into his bed as his grandmother watches. She stares at him while he sleeps and wakes up. The two smile at each other as hopeful music plays, and she winks at him. They share some silent words while smiling at each other and begin poking each other. What? Dude, you kiss your grandma on the mouth? After a weird plant growth thing in Animation Land, the following night, Grandma is tweaking on bed, per usual, and begins whistling for Mutt while choking. Mutt wakes up and heads upstairs to try to help his choking grandma. as her whistling reaches a crescendo. He runs downstairs in a panic, and Grandma gets out of bed and starts pulling a Mr. Boss tweak episode. Mutt tries to get his dad to help, but his dad starts shaking him, and his mom laughs. His dad then plops his ass down and smirks while doing nothing. Grandma flies around the room like a bag of infinite wind from the SpongeBob movie, and as Mutt enters the room again, the whistling abruptly stops. Then we cut to a graveyard that Mutt walks around alone, when suddenly he stumbles across his grandmother sitting in a chair. She stares at him, and then does that one Tyler scream, and disappears as Mutt hits a Mark Wahlberg slow motion scream. Mutt then plops into his bed and stares at the ceiling, before quickly and abruptly rolling over. His body sits in the bed with a similar plant figure now growing from his body. We sit on this shot for a few minutes before the credits roll. Thus concludes The Grandmother. Now, obviously, Grandmother is a trippy film, to say the least, but the overall plot isn't terribly difficult to follow. Mutt, is a young boy who spawns from a set of parents who don't really want him and abuse him as a result, treating him quite literally like a mutt. But he finds solace and comfort with his grandmother. But, like in life, not all good things last forever, and she passes away, such as grandparents do, unfortunately, thus placing Mutt back in his life of torment and solitude and abuse. The visuals are striking, and the audio is a character of its own, from the noises the people make to convey emotion, and the music to help draw us in to the living hell that is Mutt's life. Overall, it's a powerful story with visuals that will stick with you and make you contemplate the world that we live in. The Amputee. Next, we have The Amputee, which I'm not going to go super in-depth with, just because it's not really that interesting, honestly. Not like the other shorts, at least. The Amputee was created while Lynch's famous film Eraserhead was in a financial struggle limbo in 1974. Lynch's friend Frederick Elms was enlisted by the American Film Institute to test 2 stocks of black and white video. So, Lynch asks for permission to use these stocks to film something of his own, as the test footage. The result is a 4-ish minute long video written in one day and performed by Lynch and his friend Catherine Coulson. The short has 2 versions for both stocks, but they don't really differ in any significant ways. The short revolves around an amputee woman, played by Coulson, sitting in a chair, smoking a cigarette, and writing a letter, while a nurse, played by Lynch, tends to her stumps. It's a one-shot, with one side of the screen being more or less static as the woman writes her letter, and the other half of the screen is where most of the action is happening, with the nurse cleaning and removing sutures from the stump legs. At the end of the short, the stump the nurse is working on begins to bleed profusely and doesn't stop as the nurse tries to mitigate the bleeding, but upon realizing that the bleeding isn't stopping, the nurse flees the room. The woman during this whole ordeal sits and continues to write her letter and smoke, oblivious to what is happening to her stump. The audio throughout the short is Coulson reading aloud the letter that the woman is writing, which revolves around some mundane social interactions and romance escapades and whatnot. Overall, it's definitely a more tame film from Lynch, but it shows his unique style and kind of has like a dark humor to it. Premonitions Following an Evil Deed. The last short that we're going to cover from Lynch is Premonitions Following an Evil Deed, made in 1996. This is an incredibly short one, barely under a minute long, but it was made to be included in the film Lumière et Compagne? I don't know. Which is an anthology film with the works of 40 acclaimed directors, using the original cinematography camera. The film starts with 3 policemen walking up to the body of a young male on the ground, outside, beside a tree. The next shot is a young woman sitting in a living room. She turns to look at something off screen, before the screen goes black for 6 or 7 seconds.
Oh my god! So fucking funny! confetti!
The next shot, we see 3 women sitting outside in a porch of some kind, surrounded by vegetation and nature. One of the women stands and walks towards the camera before a bright flash cuts to the next shot, where 3 masked men perform various tasks in a bizarre laboratory with a naked woman and a giant tank of liquid at the center of it all. Following shot cuts back to the living room with the woman we saw in the beginning. She stands to greet the police officers we saw at the first shot of the film. The woman's husband stands from his chair and walks towards her as they listen to whatever it is the policeman is telling them. Shock written in their body language. Thus concludes the film. The overall story is definitely ambiguous, and it's kind of open to your own interpretation as to what's happening and the meaning of everything. The shots are quick, but each has a clear purpose, and was put in for a reason. As to what the garden ladies and the laboratory mean in the context of the young man's body being discovered, it's kind of left for you to decide. But the black and white and eerie music and the sound effects all evoke Lynch's creepy and experimental style that he's known for. Overall, a unique film with lots to say in such a short amount of time. This concludes the short films of David Lynch, a titan in the film industry whose contributions will be remembered for generations to come. I thank Mr. Minus for letting me tag along on this bizarre ride, and I shall see you all in the next video. Take it away, my good friend.
It's safe to say this collection of short films was quite the interesting look. I am only somewhat familiar with David Lynch's work, but from what I have seen, this is all on brand. It's interesting to see some of his work sort of come to fruition through these ones. Some like Eraserhead can be seen in early concepts with the grandmother, and his Nightmare Fever Dream style can be seen forming in works like The Alphabet. The works are all very abstract and thought-provoking, but not in a way that left me frustrated. I think that might be the biggest compliment I can give David Lynch and his work. While I can be confused and wondering at some things I saw, I never feel frustrated or angered. A lot of works that are as artsy and deep as this can be pretty exhausting experiences, as the viewer can be left unfulfilled with a lack of answers or clarity, but not here. Instead, I was left intrigued and fascinated. David Lynch may be gone, but his unique style remains alive through the work he left with us. There may never be another David Lynch, but the art he managed to make and the themes he explored will inspire and touch many generations to come. So with that, we may be late, but rest in peace, David Lynch. Well, that was quite the fever dream. We thank you all very much for sitting through works like this with us, as we know it isn't always easy. The content we tackle is definitely sometimes hard to digest, so we're happy to have you help us and see it through to the end. We couldn't do it without you. Now, if you'll excuse me, I think I hear 6 men getting sick outside.